Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different, diving into a truly fascinating and honestly haunting piece of text. To really unpack its meaning, I'm going to frame this whole thing as a dark fairy tale, and I'll be stepping right into the shoes of the protagonist. So, gather around because I'm taking you with me into the dark borderlands of the psyche to recount my own harrowing descent as the anti-Galahad. We are going to explore a very real psychological trap through some incredibly vivid, terrifying imagery. Let's get into it.
Our story kicks off right here, at the foot of the Iron Bridge. Think of this place as a twisted, dark mirror to those classic legends of old. You know, in ancient myths, knights would cross blades of shining steel to prove their valor, vanquish the evil, and basically save the day. But here, deep in the gray mist of the soul's borderlands, there was absolutely no glory for me to win. Instead of charging forward to prove my heroism, I just found myself totally frozen, literally paralyzed over a bottomless abyss.
No glory, only mist. Only the abyss. It completely strips away all the romanticism of a grand quest, doesn't it? I wasn't out there fighting dragons. I was facing this absolute, crushing lack of heroism. And honestly, it sets up the grim realization that this bridge isn't actually a physical place to cross at all. What it really is a geometry of guilt. This bridge is the core allegory of our tale, the mental paralysis of rigid perfectionism. I mean, think about the word geometry. It implies something calculated, rigid, cold, and entirely inescapable. It's a psychological trap that demands you stand perfectly still, because in the mind of the extreme perfectionist, any movement, any action whatsoever, risks making a mistake. And standing up there, any mistake feels like a fatal plunge right into the abyss.
But listen, every dark fairy tale has to have its monster, right? Well, enter my tormentor, the Pale Inquisitor. He just drifted there at the exact center of the bridge, acting as the terrifying arbiter of this agonizing stasis. He is the ghost of law, basically a phantom demanding an utterly impossible standard.
And the true horror of this figure was really in his appearance. He wasn't wearing the shining protective plate armor of some redeemer. No, he was draped in robes made entirely out of iron filings. And as I stood before him, those robes actually pulsed with this magnetic hunger. They literally attracted the heavy, jagged debris of every single failure I had ever experienced, hoarding every disharmonious desire I'd ever harbored. The wildest part, he didn't even judge my actual deeds. He judged my internal hunger. He was recording every single imperfect impulse in a ledger, using the ink of regret. But here's the thing. The Inquisitor isn't just a fantasy antagonist. His deep hunger for moral purity perfectly mirrors real-world historical zealots. Think about someone like Girolamo Savonarola in 15th century Florence. Just as the Inquisitor enforces this geometry of guilt and hoards my failures, historical enforcers demanded strict religious purity. They burned art and so-called vanities just to erase human temptation. Both of them demand an absolute, completely impossible behavioral perfection. And the result? Well, whether it's the mind of a perfectionist or an entire society, demanding absolute perfection always results in a wasteland. It destroys the very thing it's trying to purify.
And the actual instrument of this destruction was right there in his hand, an emerald staff. It wasn't a tool of guidance, but this chilling artifact that pulsed with a necrotic devotion to the rules. It was a magic rooted entirely in death and decay, rather than life.
The dark irony of this weapon is just profound. In ancient myths, like the flowering staff of Aaron or the budding wood of Joseph of Arimathea, a blooming staff brings forth life. It signals divine favor and miraculous, wonderful growth. But the Inquisitor's staff? It's a terrifying perversion of those legends. It offered only a living death, this rigid botanical stagnation that punished any sign of natural, chaotic life.
So when he finally struck the cold iron of the bridge with that staff, no beautiful flowers grew, obviously. Instead, the wasteland was instantly overrun by iron-thorned briars and spectral vines. These iron briars are the ultimate manifestation of my own trapped potential. They wrapped around me, totally entangling my psyche in a web of verdant iron, basically paralyzing my mind so I could never move forward. I could never take the risk of making a mistake.
As those heavy vines gripped me, the staff cast this sickening twilight glow across the whole void. It was an eerie, inescapable atmosphere, and it signaled the Inquisitor achieving his dark apotheosis. This was his terrifying, ultimate evolution into a force of absolute control.
And this twilight wasn't just a color, it was a permanent moral shadow. I was trapped perfectly, agonizingly, right between the dying light of strict, cold logic and the encroaching, terrifying darkness of wild human desire. In this twilight, the Inquisitor no longer just wanted to erase my flaws. He actually believed the horrific, paralyzing means of his law completely justified the end goal of total stasis.
"I have integration," he whispered, and in my mind those words echoed like the tolling of a spectral bell. That was his horrific declaration of victory. He genuinely believed that by freezing me entirely, by trapping me in this endless twilight, he had somehow solved the messy, complicated problem of being human.
He claimed to have mastered the wild verdant. Now this is the primal wolf of instinct. It's the chaotic, messy noise of my own soul. But the tragedy here is just profound. He didn't manifest this wild energy to let it run free. No, he manifested it to crush it down, forcing the wild, beautiful noise of life perfectly into the shape of a grave. It was sterile, it was mathematically perfect, and it was entirely dead.
So I really have to ask you, looking at this total nightmare, who truly rules this prison? Who built this bridge? Who empowered this monster in the first place? That was the stark, undeniable question I had to face in the profound psychological awakening at the end of the bridge.
Because here is the final twist of our dark fable. The Iron Bridge was never a crossing at all. It didn't lead anywhere. It was merely a prison of absolute law, and the Inquisitor was guarding an entirely empty throne.
I realized with absolute, crushing clarity that the judge and the bridge were mere reflections. The monster hoarding my failures, the magnetic iron robes, the agonizing stasis, it was all me. It was a reflection of a spirit just too afraid to be free. My own self-imposed guilt had manifested this phantom judge. I was demanding a spotless record, turning myself into a martyr for a law that saves absolutely no one.
By clinging to that geometry of guilt, I had made a truly tragic trade-off. And you know, this is the ultimate danger of rigid perfectionism. I had sacrificed a complex, beautiful, disharmonious, and beautifully messy life just to maintain a spotless, motionless line of duty. I literally traded living for the safety of standing perfectly still.
Which brings us to the end of my descent and leaves us with this haunting final image, forever trapped in a cage of living wood that would never, through all of time, be allowed to bloom. That is the true cost of the Iron Bridge. So I'll leave you with this thought. When you look at your own life, your own goals, and your own fears of failure, are you going to choose to remain perfectly safe and perfectly still trapped in your own cage of living wood? Or will you dare to cross the borderlands, embrace the chaotic noise of your soul, and let your messy, imperfect life finally bloom?